Welcome to the Business Blueprint, where entrepreneurs and business leaders learn how to work smarter, scale faster, and build better.
Good morning and welcome to episode 7 of the Business Blueprint. My name is Joe Sandine, founder and CEO of Onsharp, a local development company here in town. Joined by my co-host Clay Kraby, who's our marketing director. And we have another guest in the studio, Jake Dahl. Jake is our director of sales and marketing. And why do we have Jake with us today? Well, we're going to talk about sales and marketing alignment today. So, in a business, sales and marketing are supposed to be on the same team, but it's quite common that sometimes they feel like opposing forces. So today we're going to get into why that alignment happens, how to fix it, and just give you some advice on how to make sure your business has good sales and marketing alignment. So let's just start with a quick introduction. Let's give Jake a chance to introduce himself. So Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do for us at Onsharp in the sales world.
Yeah, so first off, thanks for having me on the show today, guys. It's always fun to come on in here. So yeah, I'm our Vice President of Sales and Marketing. So really what I am responsible for at the company is to obviously work with our potential prospects and our marketing teams so that we align together to move forward and make sure that we're providing maximum value for our clients. So I'm really kind of at the forefront of really starting those conversations and having myself and my team really take everybody through the sales process from start to finish.
So, at Onsharp, I think we're pretty blessed to have really good alignment between sales and marketing. We work very well together. I've worked with both of you for several years, and we just have a good synergy. And so I think we have a lot of good information to share about that. But Clay, I'm going to start with you. So just generally speaking, why, as you look at, over the course of all your marketing experience, why is sales and marketing misalignment? Why is it so common? Why is it such a hard thing to master?
Yeah, I think what you find in a lot of companies is you've got two completely separate departments. They're all siloed off. There's not a lot of communication, and they just have different goals. They have different ideas of what success looks like. They have different ideas of what moves the needle. And honestly, I think marketing, not to beat up on my team over here, but marketing really gets sucked into like vanity metrics. And they can come to the sales team and like, oh, look how many people visited the website and look how many people liked the social post and look how well, people are responding to this ad campaign. If the phone doesn't ring and the forms aren't getting filled out, or when sales does outreach calls, they have no idea who you are, they've never heard of you, that's not helping. So I think a lot of times there's just this, I don't want to say animosity, but there's just this conflict, this tension that just kind of simmers there, because there isn't that alignment that needs to happen for both teams really to succeed.
Yeah, that's a good point. So marketing success doesn't always equal sales success, and so you've got friction there. Jake, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think a lot of times, sales really looks at it from the standpoint of like, what can we bring in and what can we close right away? And that's really not the completely the point of marketing. Obviously, marketing is there to assist sales, but a lot of times sales teams have like this, you're really kind of outdated, I guess, thought process of like, okay, just because somebody reached out to me, they're going to close right away. And that's just not the case. And I think that's where a lot of misalignment can come in with the sales and marketing side of things. Whereas, from a marketing standpoint, there's so much more than goes into it than just obviously lead production. There's brand awareness. There's all the other things that go into that. So oftentimes you really kind of have a butting of heads of both teams. And I've seen this in many organizations where there's just an expectation that's just not realistic. In reality, what needs to happen is that both teams need to kind of come together and really understand what the other is going through, and that really can kind of, create that synergy in order to breed success.
Yeah, I think what companies need to realize is one can't be successful without the other. You can't have sales work well if marketing isn't laying that foundation of building that brand recognition and helping with that messaging and making sure things are consistent and helping work through that entire process. And the same thing is true the other way around. Marketing can't be successful if sales isn't able to like close those things down in terms of bringing in new deals, having a feedback loop to say, hey, here's what I'm hearing on the phone. Here's what seems to be important to people. I'm getting this question a lot. They really have to be working together for both to work well.
Yeah, and I feel like from my position, a lot of times that misalignment is just based on, maybe it's timing expectations. Obviously building a brand and a lot of things that marketing does has maybe a longer time horizon, and what sales is looking for is like instant gratification, let's say. So you want to speak to like the timing component and how you think that can create that friction a little bit between sales and marketing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a huge part often is there's sometimes the impression that marketing, sends someone over to sales and then that they kind of wash their hands of it and they think, well, now it should just close. Or on the opposite side of things, sales thinks, like Jake mentioned a little earlier, that you just let people know that we exist and the phone's going to be ringing off the hook. It's a long process of laying a lot of groundwork before that really comes to be the case.
Yeah, and ultimately, too, I mean, you have to look at your organization and how long your sales cycle really takes. I mean, in some situations, I mean, it should be a quick sale, but in others, it could take months, if not even maybe over a year to actually see some of these come to fruition. So just kind of having that understanding as you go into some of these processes can make a huge impact in really what the expectations are.
So, we've worked together for many years, and while we rarely have tension, we're not perfect. We've had our own tension between sales and marketing, I think, in moments in the process. Talk a little bit about how that tension ultimately hurts the business. So I think you can make excuses as for why, it's normal, it's fine, it's just never going to go away. But, I think fixing that tension is really important. What are the ramifications of having constant tension between sales and marketing?
Well, I think the main thing is when you have tension, you don't end up having communication. If there's awkwardness there, you don't want to pop your head in the door and, check in with somebody. You don't want to have another meeting. You just kind of want to avoid that feeling of awkwardness or tension. And if marketing and sales aren't communicating, you're not going to see success. It's just not possible. You need a feedback loop from both. You need to be able to come in and say, hey, I don't think this is working. Here's what I'm hearing. At a trade show, for example, I had this question 10 times. If marketing's not willing to hear that and then produce content that addresses that, for example, that's a problem. And the same way around. If marketing is going out and through market research is seeing, okay, competitors are doing X, Y, and Z, we need to pivot for these reasons. If sales isn't willing to listen to that, that's going to be a problem. So when you have that tension, you don't get the communication that you need.
Yeah, it really comes down to exactly what Clay said, really kind of having that collaborative approach to this, because oftentimes, the easiest route is just for either team to kind of be siloed and just keep doing their thing, but that doesn't lead to any improvement whatsoever. Oftentimes, marketing is really focused on looking at kind of the market as a whole and looking at competitors and what they offer. And sales is really on, the ground floor, actually dealing with potential prospects and clients. So it's absolutely critical that you have that communication, coming together on at least a weekly basis to really get both sides so that both teams can really adjust and pivot appropriately so that success can happen.
So Jake, as we've grown, I think we can all tell, alignment does get tougher as you grow, as the business matures and you add more people to the team. It does get harder to keep in good alignment. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think oftentimes, especially as you grow as an organization, things just become a little bit more complicated. And ultimately, again, people are kind of getting to their day-to-day and they don't look at the big picture all the time. And that's why it's important that as your team grows, you really have to make sure to really kind of double down on these efforts. Otherwise, things can really get astray very, very quickly. And that's, part of the reason, that we've really, been successful over the years is because we've really made sure that, our marketing and sales teams are in such good alignment, and that we haven't lost, track of really what's important and continuing to grow. And of course, we've had changes and pivots and everything like that, but it's always been together. And that's kind of the big thing that organizations really need to keep in mind is you're not going to go far just kind of siloed off. You really have to make sure it's a team effort.
Yeah, and I would say too, as you grow, you get more people. And a lot of it ends up being personalities. And there's only so much you can do that. You want to hire well, all those things, but a little humility goes a long way. So if each team thinks that they're the reason that the company is succeeding, everything depends on them and everybody else is in the way, that's not going to work well. And unfortunately, whatever it is what makes someone gravitate towards a sales career or a marketing career, you get a lot of personalities like that. And if you can't keep that in check, you're going to have some problems.
Yeah, I think that's been a big reason why we work well together is we stay humble, we listen to each other, we're transparent. Like at the end of the day, we're just all trying to, do what's best for the company. And I think as long as, personalities aside, as long as everyone's rowing in the same direction and is pursuing the same goal, I think, you should have pretty good alignment. So we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to get into, discussing where specifically that alignment typically breaks down between sales and marketing. You're listening to The Business Blueprint Welcome back to the Business Blueprint. I'm your host, Joe Sandine, joined by Clay, our Director of Marketing, and Jacob Dahl, who's our VP of Sales and Marketing at Onsharp. Today, we're talking about sales and marketing alignment. And in the first episode, or the first segment, we talked about, just why that misalignment can exist, and why it's important in a business to have good alignment if you want to grow and have success. So now we're going to dig into some of the most common areas of misalignment, and I'm going to start by asking Jake, just to kind of set the table for maybe helping understand where the misunderstandings are and where the misalignment can start from. But Jake, I want to ask you, what's the biggest, in your opinion, misunderstanding that marketing has about sales?
I would say one of the biggest misunderstandings that marketing has about sales is just from the standpoint of, I feel like a lot of times, marketing teams and individuals feel that, okay, if something is passed over to the sales team, they should have an answer on it very shortly as far as like, okay, are they actually going to close? Is it going to, did we win the deal? But it's not that simple. Oftentimes these sales processes are very complex, especially depending on what you're selling and, the price point of that particular product or service. I mean, there are cases, as mentioned kind of earlier, where, you might be looking at a sales cycle anywhere between, 3 months to 18 months, depending on what it is. It's not a quick sort of turnaround that I think a lot of marketing teams, they want that instant gratification, which isn't always going to be the case. I think the other thing that really kind of comes into play as well is, following up with these leads or these opportunities that come over from marketing are sometimes not as simple as it sounds. What I mean by that is there's oftentimes multiple layers of decisions that have to be handled in the prospect's organization as far as who really is the person that's signing off. You may be starting with somebody who really doesn't have a lot of authority, and they have to run it up the chain, and then you have to go and have a meeting with that next person, the next person, until a decision is made. So oftentimes, it's not as simple as just saying, hey, did it close or not? It's, what was the process to actually get to that decision, which can take an extraordinary amount of time and a lot of work to do that as well.
What do you think about that, Clay?
No,
what's that tell you as Mr. Marketing?
No, I agree completely. And I think a lot of times marketing doesn't seem to understand in different companies that the lead that comes in, the individual that clicks the ad, fills out the form, picks up the phone, isn't the only person that sales has to talk to. They may be the person that has the pain point in their company, that has no decision-making authority at that company to, purchase that service or that solution or product or whatever. So once it's over to the sales, it's not, you're not 80% of the way there. Honestly, you're probably 20% of the way there. Maybe at best, depending on what you're selling, maybe you're halfway there to a new customer. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think a lot of times different companies, different scenarios, marketing doesn't appreciate the amount of legwork that's required to take someone that comes in as a lead and then turn them into a customer. They might be having multiple conversations. They might be pulling in 3 to 4 other people, depending on how high a price point you have and how complex the deal is that you're trying to construct. So I think a lot of times marketing doesn't have an appreciation for what's going to happen after you pass that lead over. We feel like, oh, well, I gave you the lead, just close that person. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective too, it's a lot of times I see a misunderstanding, and it's a collaboration between the two teams. Like, I don't think it's just a handoff from marketing to sales. I think as sales is working with a prospect, there's a lot of stuff that sales is going to need from the marketing team, and marketing needs to be able to respond quickly with those assets and those different things. And then at the same time, like, salespeople aren't marketing people. So like, salespeople maybe don't always know how to ask for what they want. They're going to be very kind of basic and rudimentary about it. And then marketing's got to kind of, so I think sometimes educate the sales team. And so I think, again, that you have to have synergy all through the sales process. Like, I don't think it can just be a handoff from marketing to sales.
Right.
Agreed.
All right, let's flip the script. Clay, what is the biggest misunderstanding you think sales has about marketing?
I think in a lot of companies, and again, we're very fortunate that I don't feel like we have a lot of these tensions most of the time here with us at Onsharp, but I think it's very, very common where sales believes that marketing can just do something, and then the phone's going to ring. They'll say, oh, it's a little slow. Can you do something?
Yeah,
can you send out an email, put something on the Facebook, and then the forms are going to be filled out and the phone's going to ring. There's very few situations where you can just flip a switch and turn a knob and get more into the pipeline for sales. It is a lot of groundwork. And the unfortunate reality, and frankly, some marketers don't even understand this about marketing. The unfortunate reality, it's the slow, boring stuff that takes months, if not years, that really moves the needle. It really helps. Yeah. So unless you've got a lot of low-hanging fruit and there's just a lot of stuff you're not doing well, it's very unlikely that you can just do something on Monday so that by Friday they've seen this huge impact. So I think there's just a misunderstanding. And I think another challenge that comes in, and it's not just sales, everybody thinks they can do marketing. Every person, no matter what your role as a company, you got opinions on marketing. Nobody's knocking on the accountant's door with ideas. But everybody thinks that, well, this is what I would do if I was in marketing. That happens as much from sales as anybody else. So I think that causes some conflict as well.
That's tough. Yeah, Jake?
Yeah, I would agree 100% with both those points. And I think, too, just in managing sales teams for, almost 20 years now, there's definitely a a feeling from a lot of salespeople where when they do receive, opportunities, leads from marketing, they just have that assumption of like, oh, these people are really qualified and we're ready to go. Like, that's not the case. Like, marketing's job is to get eyeballs on it, and it's sales jobs to take it the rest of the way. So I think that can definitely be a misalignment with a lot of salespeople's mindset of just like, oh, because it came from marketing, these people are ready to buy. That's just not the case. I mean, sales still has to do their job day in and day out to make sure that happens. And kind of to Clay's point too, like, everybody's got an opinion on marketing, and because they may not see some of those results immediately, a lot of times sales will just think, well, we got to change, we got to switch, we got to do something different, and that's just not the case. Marketing at the end of the day is a slow burn type of thing. You got to give it time. You have to really kind of put it through its paces and test it appropriately, and that's where, let's just be honest, a lot huge are very impatient when it comes to those things. And that's where just having that team alignment and making sure everybody's on the same page can make a huge impact in just kind of leveling those expectations of what to expect.
And I think that's where the opportunity lies in a lot of businesses. Sales and marketing don't start collaborating until, I would almost say, it's too late. Like, you suddenly are like, oh, the business is in a pinch. We need more leads. We need more opportunity. And you think you're going to fix it overnight. And again, that, like Clay said, that rarely happens. So I think the advice would be, you got to sit down and plan earlier. You got to be collaborating and talking, and you have to be building that foundation sooner, because, marketing's a long play. It's building your brand is a long-term thing, and it isn't going to just happen overnight. And then to speak to, everyone thinks they're a marketer. I mean, it's true. I mean, we all have our opinion because we're all consumers, right? Yep. We all see stuff that works for us. But I think what's really critical is sales is out in the field talking to the customer. So I do think sales is really in tune with what the customer wants. And as long as you have good communication, sales bringing that back to marketing, and marketing truly listening, that's when I think you can really make sure you have the right messaging and the right assets, like to really have a good game plan that's going to resonate with the customer.
Yeah, and again, that communication is really key, because if marketing's listening to sales, that's going to impact how we're marketing, and vice versa. That should impact the way that sales leaves voicemails, should be impacted by what marketing has to say, and the way that marketing produces an ad or a handout for a trade show needs to be impacted by what sales has to say.
Yep. So the job of marketing and sales is to work together and generate leads, right, and close those leads. And sometimes there can be a mismatch in what a good lead looks like. How does a mismatch really hurt how the team works together? Like, can you just kind of talk to, like, sometimes marketing thinks they're producing good qualified leads, but sales is like, yeah, this is not what we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most common one is the difference between quantity and quality. Marketing, unfortunately, is often incentivized to just get numbers of leads, and that's what looks good on their weekly reports and quarterly reports. Oh, we brought in so many leads, but numbers don't really matter if those aren't ever going to convert and become a customer. Mm-hmm. So marketing needs a really strong definition of what a good lead is, and we have to take that from sales. There's still times where you come back from a trade show or something, and I get all excited, or something comes to the website and it's, oh, this is really good. And by the time Jake's done talking to them, it's clear, like, no, it's not. The budget wasn't there. The timing wasn't there. They didn't have the decision-making authority or whatever. And they've got the gut for that, and they have the ability to kind of suss that out in those early conversations. Marketing's got to get that feedback so that we can understand, okay, what is a good lead, and what can we do to bring more of those in?
Yeah, and I think that brings us back to a previous episode where we talked about EOS and how important it is as a business to have a well-defined target market. If you are aligned as a business on who's your target market and who you're trying to sell to, it becomes a lot easier for the sales and marketing team to agree on the quality of that lead. All right, so we need to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what good alignment actually looks like in practice. You're listening to the Business Blueprint. Welcome back. This is Joe Sandine, joined by Clay Kraby, Director of Marketing at Onsharp, and Jake Dahl, VP of Sales and Marketing at Onsharp. And today, we are talking about how to have good sales and marketing alignment in your organization. And so in the last episode, or in the last segment, we discussed some of the common areas of breakdown and where businesses can kind of go astray as far as trying to create that alignment. So so in this segment, we're going to talk about what good and real alignment looks like in practice. So Clay, in a perfect world, what does good sales and marketing alignment look like in practice?
Yeah, I think you definitely have to have clear, agreed upon goals. And my mindset with marketing, my job is to make sales job easy. I want to either bring them in people that are already interested in what we have to sell or have to offer, whether it be a product or a service. My job is to get in front of those people, make them aware of what we have them almost convinced that we're the correct solution, we're the correct provider for that, and then bring that person over to sales and hand them off. That's my goal, is that either I do that, or when they pick up the phone to speak to someone, even if it's a cold call, that person has some awareness of what we have to offer, who we are as a brand, that sort of thing. So my job as a marketer is to make sales job as easy as possible, and I think that goes a long way. You really want to have clear handoff points as well. What are we going to do? At what point are we going to say, okay, this person is ready to talk to someone at sales, and what is the process for that? So I think that's important, but it's also important to know that marketing job isn't done at that point. There might be needs for nurturing campaigns for, as Jake's pointed out a few times in this conversation, for months. You know, if someone's not ready to make a decision right now, the worst thing that we can do is just to chuck that name in the garbage can and move forward. No, there needs to be a process in place for sales potentially to turn that back over to marketing and continue to get them some messaging, some content, some other information to keep them in the process so that when the timing is right, they come back into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that sales really needs to make sure that they're accomplishing so that there's good alignment on both sides is really being in contact with marketing, actually telling marketing what they're hearing from prospective clients, what is actually going out in the field. You know, that is invaluable. I mean, a lot of times marketing teams are kind of going off of like the research that they do, which is obviously a great starting point, but they also need to hear it exactly of what clients are actually asking for and prospects are asking for. So just having sales really make sure that they're, you know, taking time out of their week to inform the team, because that's only going to help them obviously improve, you know, their prospects, improve what they can do as far as get those, you know, prospects to actually close and become customers. So, I mean, that's going to be a huge part of it from that perspective. I think, you know, another thing is just making sure and understanding that, you know, marketing is not, they're not magicians. They can't just make things happen. It takes time, and there has to be efforts on both sides so that, again, clear alignment can be made as you kind of move forward with both sides of the team.
Yeah, so obviously a big part of that alignment is getting the messaging right for the business, right? Working together. So how do you guys work together to collaborate and continually improve Onsharp's messaging so that it resonates with our customer?
Well, I think that feedback loop is critical. That we mentioned a couple of times, because marketing needs to understand that everything that they do is hypothetical in terms of messaging until you get that feedback from sales or you go hear it yourself. So I think one of the biggest things that it's helped the most for us being in alignment is that I, as a marketer, have been at the trade shows with Jake, having real world conversations, having random acronyms dropped on me in conversation that I had no basis for understanding, and realizing, okay, we've got a big gap in our messaging here because 3 people have mentioned such and such a program or integration or whatever else. We don't address it at all. in our marketing. So I think marketing needs to be on the phone every once in a while if that's the format of your business, or at a trade show or some way. And then I think also important is that direct feedback loop from sales.
They have to be in some sort of like sales process at some point to see what is actually happening, as Clay pointed out. And I bet you if you took a survey of just say 10 businesses, I bet you 9 of their people that are actually in the marketing seat have not done that.
Yep.
And I think that is absolutely critical in order for marketing to be aligned in what sales is seeing. Oftentimes it can come, kind of maybe, word of mouth or whatever, but they actually need to be involved, whether it's at a show, whether it's on a call, again, depending upon what you're selling, how you actually go about and getting prospects and getting clients. Marketing needs to see that firsthand so that they can actually make an assessment and then plan accordingly from that.
Yeah, it's really smart you guys do that, because if you don't, I think that's where you see a lot of misalignment. Marketing thinks they know what the customer wants to hear, but they don't know it from actual real data and real experience. So then you start getting headbutting where sales is like, no, we need to talk like this. And marketing's like, no, I think we should talk like this. But really, at the end of the day, it's the real hard data of what you're hearing in the market that should tell you that. Yeah,
and I think it's important too. We try to do a good job of this. It can be hard with really long sales cycles, but Jake lets me know when things close, and we have conversations about what went on along the way, because a lot of times marketing hands over a lead
and they never hear about it again.
They never hear about it again. They don't know if it went nowhere. They don't know if it was the biggest deal of the year. So we need that feedback to go, okay, it seemed like that was going somewhere. All we did was spin our wheels on it for 6 weeks and it kind of dissolved, or somebody else came in and they just sprinted through the whole process. So marketing needs to have an understanding of, okay, what is that step-by-step process that sales goes through, and where are the leads that I'm bringing into the system? Where are they going? Are they all getting to the first meeting and no further? We don't want to bring you any more leads like that. We've got to figure out what's going on.
And just as importantly as well, even if there's a prospect that you take through the sales process and you get them all the way, but then they decide to go in another direction, or you lose to a competitor, marketing needs to know that too.
Yep.
Not just about the wins, but you also need to learn about the losses. That's actually where a lot more information comes from oftentimes.
Yeah, was it the price? They got almost all the way there, almost to the finish line, and then they balked at the price and they got out of the process, or there was a feature that they didn't care for, or maybe the process itself was a painful one. Marketing has a way to come in and look at things that sales might not see and make it smoother, better communication, better slide decks, whatever.
Reduce the friction.
Reduce the friction. So they need. I think that's a really good point. The losses, the lost sales, really important information.
Yeah. So you guys seem to be really in alignment on metrics, just as I hear you talk. So what metrics have you guys defined that are important both on the sales and marketing side together? Because I think that's a big thing to be in alignment on, is like what numbers actually matter and what numbers don't.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think every business is a little bit different, but if you are not making decisions based off the data, you are not doing the right job. I mean, it comes down to activity. It comes down to number of calls. In our case, it's, obviously calls, it's meetings, it's, where are they at and what stage as far as the sales process is concerned. All of those things need to be looked at, just tooth and nail every single day, so that you understand and have a really good idea of what your forecast actually looks like. And I think there's way too many organizations out there that don't do a good job of actually looking at those numbers, because that's going to tell the story. That's going to tell you what your success is going to look like, whether it's in the next quarter, the next, year, anything along those lines.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then again, understanding what is the life cycle of that prospect. So if marketing comes in and thinks, oh, I handed off a lead, great. They need to understand that it goes from, for example, a lead. They have a conversation with sales to kind of qualify things, and now they're an opportunity. Now they could be a customer. I need to know not only how many leads am I chucking over the fence, how many people are moving on to each stage of the process.
So
that's what determines if they're good.
You've obviously defined a funnel together.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's talk about cadence a little bit. So obviously sales and marketing, the more they communicate, the better alignment's going to be. What's What's your sales and marketing cadence, Jake, as far as weekly, monthly, quarterly? How do you guys stay in alignment?
I mean, it's a weekly conversation at a very minimum. I mean, we are very diligent about keeping the same day, same time every single week, where it's just obviously like myself, and as far as Clay goes, leading the marketing team, myself leading the sales team. And then as far as like our teams are concerned, we try to do that on a monthly basis as well, because I'm a big believer if it happens to an individual on the team, it's going to happen to other individuals on the team. So everybody should really understand those situations and know how to react to them and be able to make decisions based off of them as well.
So just tactically speaking, going back to EOS and the level 10 meeting agenda. So would it be accurate to say you have a weekly sales and marketing meeting, and then do you also have a separate weekly marketing meeting with your team and a weekly sales meeting just with your team, Jake?
Correct.
And then I think, all that's great. The EOS system is great, and having those formalized set agenda meetings are great. And I think there's a lot of value just in informal. Jake and I talk every day, a couple times a day. It might be a quick check-in. It might be, hey, what do you think of this? I think being able to have those informal, just frequent, sporadic conversations is really important too.
So what role does leadership play in this alignment and enforcing alignment? Like what would you say from your two seats as far as what you look for from leadership to make sure that you can maintain good alignment?
I think obviously like understanding that leadership plays a critical role in being able to really kind of set the tone for a lot of organizations. I think, our team has done a really good job in just, obviously running on EOS and making sure that, everything is aligned the way it needs to be. Like oftentimes what I have seen in other organizations is, a little bit of, I guess you could say, unorganized, maybe is the best way to put it, where, for example, like their sales team doesn't talk to their operations and vice versa and all different things. And like, that's where I feel like with us, just in kind of having that leadership, level where everything has kind of been set, that really kind of filters down. So if you don't have kind of that strong leadership, I guess, organizational side of things for your business, it really affects everything kind of on the trickle down effect. I mean, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take our final break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about some tips and advice we can give you on if you have sales and marketing alignment issues, how to kind of get started and move in the right direction. We'll be back in a little bit. Welcome back. This is Joe Sandine. We're with Clay, Director of Marketing at Onsharp, and Jake Dahl, VP of Sales and Marketing at Onsharp. And today we've been talking a lot about sales and marketing alignment, misalignment, how things break down, how to get back on track. So I want to kind of wrap up today, kind of talking about, what are some of the first things you can do if you find that your company just has, bad alignment, bad synergy, butting heads, just things aren't working well, because alignment is built through good habits and ultimately having a good system in place in your business. So Clay, I'm going to start with you. What's the first step you think a company should take to improve their sales and marketing alignment?
Yeah, and I think all of this is going to fall under the umbrella of communication, but okay, what are we talking about? There has to be clear expectations. There has to be a clear understanding from both sales and marketing. Okay, what makes a good lead? Who are we going after? And what process are we taking them through to go from, hey, they're just somebody that might be interested, to they are, writing a check for our product, for our services, whatever that, they're becoming a customer. So there has to be a clear set understanding, and I think the larger your team is, the more documented that needs to be. Because you can't just assume that people are rowing the boat in the same direction. You need to make sure of that. You need to document it. Mm-hmm. You need to have it really clearly defined in black and white. This is what we're going for, so that when things aren't working, you can look at, okay, does this need to change, or are we not doing what we intended to do at each stage of this process?
Yeah, I would 100% agree, and I would even take it a step further in saying even if it's a newer, smaller team, documentation is really important, so that way you really kind of avoid the he said, she said kind of in the future from that perspective. And obviously that's going to adjust. Every company and every business is going to change over time. I mean, that's a given, but at least starting off with like an aligned expectation of like, this is what actually we are both kind of working towards can make a huge impact. I also think too, making sure that, both sides are spending some time in the others just to kind of get a feel for what they do on a day-to-day basis can make a huge impact as well. And it can really make people understand what that team goes through every single day. So it really can provide a lot more context into like, oh man, I thought that was going to be a lot easier, but after actually sitting with them, wow, that was kind of difficult, So I think it just provides a lot more appreciation for what the other group does as well.
And I think, you talk about having solid definitions of what metrics matter and what the process is. From a leadership perspective, leadership needs to kind of set the table and make sure that sales and marketing both understand where the business is going as a whole, again, who the target market is. Because I think one of my biggest fears from a leadership position is people wasting time doing things that we don't need to do. I mean, sales and marketing in most organizations, it's a finite resource and you never have enough of it. You always wish you had more salespeople. You always wish you had more marketing assets or marketing people on your team. So you just don't have time to waste.
Yep.
And if you have bad alignment, there's a pretty high risk you're going to waste time creating assets, spending money on Facebook ads or whatever for things that are just going to be all for naught. And as a leader, that's what keeps me up at night if I were to think about my sales and marketing team having poor alignment. So a big piece of this is those feedback loops. We talked earlier about it's like we do a really good job having sales and marketing together in the mix and having good feedback loops. So how do companies, what's some steps you can take to get better at feedback loops?
We've had to get better along the way too, and one thing that we've tried to implement, not always successfully, is just at least a quarterly coming together of the whole marketing team, the whole sales team to get that feedback. Because what can happen easily is marketing produces some content, they put it out in some Dropbox folder, and then 6 months later, sales says, "Hey, we could really use something like this," and we go, "Haven't you been using this thing that I built?" That can happen easily because again, there's not that easy flow of communication. Everybody's got their own job. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got their own goals. So you really need to set that up. So that's a potential, solution to that. But you just want to make sure that they have that opportunity to give information back and forth.
So it's amazing we've gone this far into this episode and being technologists. We haven't even talked about tech tools yet. So I think a question I have is obviously we depend a lot on our technology tools in the sales and marketing world. So what systems and tools help our alignment? And then are there any that actually hurt our alignment, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most organizations, there's probably going to be some sort of CRM tool that they're going to be utilizing where sales is actually able to go in and really kind of document every single activity that's been done, whether it's with a prospect or a client from that perspective. Having that visibility and really understanding, what is actually going into the outreach, what is going into communication, with both prospects and clients, I mean, depending on how your organization is set up, is absolutely critical. That's usually another, avenue where a lot of times materials can be found where, sales teams can share those out. And that's typically, I mean, I think with a lot of organizations where, marketing would obviously play in that arena as well as being able to provide some of that documentation. So, I mean, that's obviously huge, just from kind of being able to see really kind of what is going on from the kind of the outreach perspective, which can answer a lot of questions or adjustments can be made. So that would probably be the main one from that perspective.
And I think that's a really good example of how sales can help marketing and how marketing can help sales. Because if both departments are committed to making sure that the data within their CRM is good and is as complete as possible, they can both help each other. So if marketing brings in a lead and they're bringing information on the company size, the industry, the pain point, everything that we've been able to gather and know based on their behavior or conversation or whatever, and bring that in, now when sales picks up the phone, they can play off of that. Well, after sales has been talking to them for a little while, if they're completing those notes and recording good details, marketing can go back in 6 months later and say, hey, show me everybody in this state or in this industry that seemed interested but didn't go anywhere. Well, now we can kind of cycle them back through a nurturing campaign. But it's garbage in, garbage out. If
everybody's got to be on the same page as far as being able to put in the information, because if people are not rowing in the same direction as far as using those tools, it can become very messy very quickly.
Well, you know what happens. I think businesses look at tools and they think, oh, the next flashy tool. Like I'm going to solve all my sales and marketing alignment problems just by buying the next tool. And it's not the tool that's the problem. It's the fact that you have no process or you have no agreed upon metrics.
Yep.
So I think it's a dangerous place to be, to keep switching tools. Like what's our strategy, Clay, from a tool perspective? And, there's a million tools out there. And with AI, there's a million more tools, that have come out in the last couple of years. How do we strategically handle tool selection and not overwhelming ourselves?
Yeah, I think you got to not lose sight of what your goals are. I think a lot of people are quick we had a early conversation with our episode on AI stuff. Is people want to automate things. Well, if something's broken or doesn't work well, don't automate it. Get rid of it. Cut it off. So I think what problem are we trying to solve, and is everybody on the same page of how we're going to use this tool? And then I think you ride that horse as long as it's helpful. You can be willing to change, but you can't just keep jumping on different horses and jumping from tool to tool.
I think what I've learned too is less is more. There's so many metrics you can measure, and there's so many dashboards, and there's just so many, I feel like half the tools that we've looked at over time, they end up having probably hundreds of features we don't even need. So I think simplicity is key, not overdoing it, because your mind between sales and marketing, everyone just gets confused. Like, what are we actually looking at? What numbers actually matter? And you just got to get what's not important out of your view, right?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point too of like, tools are not the answer. It's if you're having challenges, it's because of broken processes, not because you need the next new tool.
Yep. So, well, that does it. I wish we had another hour to talk, but we don't. So today we're joined by Jake. Thank you for coming in the studio and repping the sales side of this conversation. When sales and marketing stop competing and start collaborating, that is really when the customer and the business win. So that'll do it for this episode of the Business Blueprint. We will see you next time.